it's also a world where if AI does replace your job, it should also find you a new one, no exceptions. Talk with the AI, it's going to get to know you, and then we're going to fast track you through the process. We're going to get you live matched to 50 companies that are interested in your particular skills. So hopefully, instead of being unemployed for 90 days, you get hired instantaneously.
Could you paint a picture for us of maybe kind of the unexpected ways that AI is going to impact workers and hiring in the next few years? Maybe tell us what that looks like and how it might even challenge or change our current understanding of work.
Well, okay, I can paint you the next 10 years in terms of waves of AI transformation. And the
Paint.
reason, yeah, I'll paint, well, so I'm going to put up a slide and I'll show you what it looks like. But the
Great.
premise of this is that my co-founder Greg and I, we co-founded UpWage 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago. And Greg was doing his PhD in AI and labor markets. Both of us met in the workforce transformation space and the military space. And the biggest question we had was, what is like the one problem that we can solve for the next 10 years that will make maximum impact? And one of the biggest things we're concerned about is the fact that AI is amazing and is going to create a lot of economic opportunity, but it also has its downsides. There's a lot of significant ramifications and people who will be potentially displaced and impacted by AI. So our hyper optimistic view on all this was, how do we leverage AI for good? How do we create an AI safety net for the job market in a hyper disrupted labor market where essentially like layoffs are constantly happening, jobs are being created, but they're also being destroyed. And so that's the premise for why we co-founded UpWage. And a couple months ago, even like a month ago, I can't keep track of time anymore because it's moving so quickly. But last month, Greg and I were sitting down and we do our exercise for the year where we basically say, hey, how far into the future can you really see right now? And what's your level of conviction around the next decade? And so we sit down and we mind meld for like 2 days and we think about this. And we came out with our 3 waves. And so the 3 waves, can I share screen share? Will to do that?
Sure.
Okay. So the 3 high conviction predictions that we have. So wave 1 is already happening right now. We call this wave the transformation of recruiting tasks. So by 2026, what we're going to see is AI driven interviews. We call these like AI interviewing agents, are really going to be mainstream in hiring. It's already starting right now. And so that is a pretty exciting world. It also opens up a lot of opportunities for recruiters to shift from these admin tasks to really focusing more on strategic talent engagement and relationship building. And potentially also, not potentially, we actually have the data to back this, but leads to faster hiring, better hires, lower turnover for businesses, which is really exciting. That's wave 1. Wave 2 is really fascinating, the transformation of talent organizations. So as an example, GoPuff Bevmo is one of our partners, and they have adopted 962 AI agents to date that are interviewing agents and analyst agents. And I'll explain what these are that we're building out. But what happens that's really interesting here is like the mass adoption of AI agents actually creates the need for a more collective intelligence type structure. So this AI talent manager that evolves is super fascinating. Our head of AI, Yvonne, is already working on this, but essentially what it comes down to is you need like an AI manager level to manage your teams of AI agents that reports ideally to the TA, HR, chief people officer. And that's going to be hugely disruptive to organizations in a very exciting way. Now, wave 3 is actually what we care about the most, and it's why we're building UpWage and why we care about being a part of this movement at all. Really, it comes down to the fact that like in this wave 3, what we see is almost like a universal job interviewer replacing the application black hole that job seekers currently have to go through, where they just send thousands of resumes, thousands of applications, like praying and wishing that they're somehow going to get an interview with a company. And so this world of like search-based, like job search, literally, and search overall, we see as being replaced, eaten by conversational AI. So Google already being eaten by GPT, Indeed and LinkedIn are the examples here right now by conversational AIs that we're going to be building at UpWage, right? And so what's really interesting here and what we're most excited about is the opportunity with this universal AI interviewer to essentially mitigate mass layoffs. Layoffs today derail careers. People are unemployed for months at a time. It's super stressful. It's really painful. And so what we're looking to do is build out this universal AI interviewer that becomes the workforce safety net. We call it the AI safety net of the future. And so that's why wave 1 is actually so important. It's like, as we're building out these AI interviewers last year, we built out 4,017 AI agents. It's like, how do we get to millions of agents so that in effect, we can actually then leverage all those agents to build out a candidate facing AI that can redeploy talent instantaneously. So that's a little bit of what we see in the future.
Cool. So you're basically talking about, I mean, almost like Uber, where if you finish one job or run one role, you just kind of pull up your app and there's another one that's ready for you immediately. And it's really good, is what you're you're aiming for?
Yes, it's more like, I would say more like, okay, Dell just laid, I mean, I should probably not mention company names, but like well-known company in news lays off 12,000 people. We can go to those 12,000 people and say, hey, we've got a universal AI interviewer. Talk to it about your skills, your background, your competencies. We're going to get you live matched to 50 companies that are interested in your particular skills. We're going to combine all of their interview process into one universal interview process. Talk with the AI, it's going to get to know you, and then we're going to fast track you through the process. So hopefully, instead of being unemployed for 90 days, you get hired instantaneously. There's also obviously like modalities around upskilling that are involved with this, because it's not going to be direct translations of skills all the time. So that's also built into the vision for the future. But yeah.
Awesome. You have any success stories, or maybe you could tell us a couple of case stories about how this has improved outcomes?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so first gen AI interviewing. So let me just go back to like what the actual products are. So we have an advanced AI behavioral interviewing agent. What this interviewing agent does is it essentially probes. So it like talks with candidates, it probes, it does follow-ups. In HR space, we call it star interviewing, which is like an advanced form of interviewing. Um, and so the AI interviewing agents, we started with high volume roles, entry level roles, and now it's interviewing for C-suite level roles, which is mind boggling, but amazing. And so that is like the first AI agent that we created. We had to create a second AI agent to handle the volume of interviews coming through. Most of the roles we're working with get, upwards to 500 applicants per role. So you can imagine the number of interviews that are happening. And so the second AI agent is an AI analyst agent. And what that agent does is it reads every single interview coming in. And it also works with TA leaders and TA teams to understand what competencies and skills really define a high potential fit. So this is where you go like layers beyond the resume, layers beyond pedigree, what college you went to, all the sort of like bias stuff that hiring tends to be based on. And you go actually into potential, which is why we're so excited about the capacity of AI to reduce bias in the hiring process. So as a result, a couple of the things that have been really interesting. Most of the companies we worked with started in the beginning looking at time savings. So they were interested in how can the AI help us save time, because the interviewing and screening process is super time consuming. And that tends to be the reason why most candidates don't get interviewed. It's not because like companies don't want to offer everyone an equal experience. It's just because there's literally not enough time in the day to interview like a 64,000 applicants a month, right? So you just have to have shortcuts. What AI offers instead, what we built out is the ability to literally interview everyone and to actually give everyone a chance and to review their real results. And so the time savings element was the first part. It was like, how do you help recruiters get through this huge pipeline of candidates and actually offer everyone the opportunity to participate in the process? I would say GoPuff Venmo is a good example. So we started off with about $1 million in time savings for them in year one. But the kicker that's been really interesting is actually the turnover. So our prediction, so in this space, there's a lot of like chatbots that exist, right? So our competitors are typically not generative AI, but sort of like AI skin chatbots. But essentially what they do is they only drive efficiency because they're primarily like almost basic level questionnaires that are happening, right? So what we did is when we built our advanced AI behavioral interviewer, we were focused on quality of hire. So our whole thought was here, can we actually significantly improve the quality of hire? AKA, can we decrease turnover by getting the right folks into the right roles? Can we increase performance? And so over the last year, essentially, we've gotten the longitudinal data to pull this out, like prove this out. So for GoPuff, we were able to decrease turnover costs by about 1.08 million. We decreased turnover in their highest volume role by 23%, which was super exciting. And then we were like, oh, we should probably check and see if this is happening across all the companies we're working with. So then we're working with different healthcare companies. And one of the healthcare companies we're working with, PRN, we actually decreased their turnover by 48% in their patient service representative roles, which was super exciting to see because that's equivalent to about 1.4 million in annual turnover savings for them. And another great example is another healthcare company where we work with this super high volume call center rep hiring. And they have fairly high turnover, so 53.2% turnover, and we decreased turnover to 34.6% turnover by really building out AI agents that specialize in understanding what a high retention candidate looks like. So yeah, those are a couple of the interesting things that have been happening in our world.
So it's obvious AI is creating a lot of, kind of dramatic opportunity. There's a lot of fear, as you know, about job displacement, about what happens when all of these people that are doing things that they've done for, sometimes decades or careers, all of a sudden their whole industry is gone, like what happens when self-driving cars come out and so forth. What are you guys doing to address some of this stuff?
Yeah. Well, so the fear, so around the jobs, this is the premise for everything, right? That's why we sort of are aiming towards wave three. And the reality is that, I mean, I was talking to a VC recently about this, but it was about the fact that like, mm, AI will and already is driving massive economic growth.
Yeah.
And usually when a technological shift drives massive economic growth, the downside is it also creates massive economic suffering for those who are left behind.
Yeah.
And this is actually where I think we have a fairly unique perspective in this space, where it's like we're not just looking to capture the gains of capitalism. We are literally like looking at this entire situation, being like, okay, the reason we founded the company is to build this AI safety net for job seekers, right? Where actually they can find jobs a lot faster in a world where work is no longer guaranteed. So I think to be able to get there, you need the foundational pieces. Like you have to actually have AI interviewing agents, you have to have competency-based hiring that goes beyond the traditional resume and job descriptions because those are inaccurate data sources. So it's like trash data in, trash data out, which is why the existing system is actually so inefficient. So to get to a more effective matching system, you have to have better data. And that better data comes from the ability to communicate with candidates and collect better data from them, understand them better, be patient enough to spend time to really understand their stories, their potential, their skills, their competencies, and what they can become. And then be able to then match that to TA teams, to hiring teams that you've worked with to tune and understand what we're really looking for in the hiring process.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's one part of it. And I think the other part of like, how do you engineer a movement or a move towards AI for good? It comes down to painting a story of possibility. Like what we've realized, at least in the TA HR space, is that there is a prevailing story that is somewhat mainstream right now that is pretty terrifying. But there's also another story that you can create around how to leverage this tech for good. And that's a different kind of world. Like it's a world where AI helps to find talent that gets traditionally overlooked, where AI can be used to help candidates who would never usually get a chance because they don't check the right boxes actually be seen, which is what's happening with our partners today. And that's why it's so exciting. It's a world where bias actually decreases, right? Because you've actually taken these processes where human beings have created shortcuts necessarily because they don't have time to analyze everyone, to actually make a consistent hiring process that is more merit based come into fruition, right? And it's also a world where if AI does replace your job, it should also find you a new one, no exceptions, on both a private level and also a public level. But I think what's missing right now in the public sphere is actually a conversation around what this AI for good narrative looks like. And without that story of what's possible, it's actually very difficult for leaders to step into leading into that world. So a
Hmm.
lot of the work that we do, of course, we build products, we're building AI agents, we're doing all this stuff on the technical side, but also we're building that story for our industry so that leaders in our industry can say, hey, I don't feel good about the way this is going. I want a different story where I can use this technology to really empower. And so I think a lot of our inspiration comes from leaders like Salma Khan from the Khan Academy, and his book Brave New Words, right, where he talks about the future of education and lays out like here's the roadmap for how AI can empower teachers, can empower students. I think like these types of stories are actually super critical because otherwise the default state is to just be in one of fear and perpetuating everything that's currently wrong with our world, but more with AI.
It seems too that as generative AI kind of sweeps through pretty much all levels of reality here, that when someone does get to the end of a role, a job, an industry, a career, that there's going to be a transition to whatever they're going to do, but that thing is likely to involve using generative AI. And so the skill of interacting with generative AI seems important. I've been doing a lot of teaching on that. I've created courses on kind of how to think about AI and how to communicate with it and so forth. You talked about upskilling. Is this kind of incorporated into your plan and your roadmap? Is helping people to learn how to use it?
It is. It is. This is actually the second. So we're writing a book right now, Agents of Change, around how to leverage AI for good in TA and HR. The second book I'm being asked right now to write is essentially around how do I describe? We don't have a title for it, but basically, it's like if I'm a high schooler today, how do I use AI? What do I need to do to prepare myself for the careers of the future? Because what's important is that most of the TA HR leaders that we work with also have kids, their parents, and this
Yeah.
is a prevailing conversation we're constantly having, which is what do you do now? What is the pathway? Is college even relevant? What are the skills that are going to matter? How do you prepare for this AI future? Is trade school the route to go? So like super interesting conversations going on that part. We haven't crystallized our vision for the future from a job seeker perspective yet, which is probably why we haven't written the book yet. But once we do, we will. And I think it's super important to figure this out. So
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you see the partnership between humans and generative AI evolving, over the next 5, 10, 20 years?
I can sort of speak for myself if it's helpful. And then I can sort of talk about this from a recruiting perspective as well.
Yeah, great.
Um, on the recruiting side, okay, so recruiting specific, just domain specific, because we do this all day. I have a like very, very, very crystallized thought process on this.
Mhm.
The role of the recruiter, when you save, so right now 50% of time is spent on phone screening, right? And a lot of this we're using the AI to do the phone screening, the interviewing. That doesn't mean that recruiters stop doing interviews. It just means that they focus on interviewing the highest potential candidates first and the most engaged candidates. So that doesn't go away. It's more the effectiveness of the process. The second is as time opens up, we've actually already started our recruiting teams doing this. And I think this is going to continue to increase over time. What happens is the recruiters are pulled more into relational tasks. So essentially the question of, well, can you now you have more time, let's support onboarding, like actually bring candidates from that first point of you're hired to like first day and make sure that they stick through that process. Other areas that are super interesting, white glove service was typically like high touch point, humans like being like, oh, how are you? We love you for our company. We love you. That's usually reserved for executives, executive roles. But in this world where there's more time on the human side, that can be for everyone. Even an hourly worker could actually get high touch. So you see on the recruiting side, we call them relationship architects, like the evolution of the role moving towards relationship architects. The TA leader is really interesting. So the chief people officer role shifts from managing people and technology stacks to essentially a mixed workforce of AI agents and humans. And the question becomes, how does your team work together with AI agents? And those are a lot of the conversations happening internally in companies right now is how do I as a leader evolve to effectively pair my people with AI agents to make them incredibly productive? Within our team, the way we think about this is each team member also has their team of AI agents that supports them. So inputs equals outputs. You can literally 10 to 20x your inputs if you have a team of AI agents working for you. So it's your team, it's the structure of your team. On a personal level, what that means is like, it's almost like I can give you an example of writing. So I usually talk to GPT, like not the talking version, but I audio like speak into it and then it turns into text, that version, because the just pure talking version is it's not good. So um it's the shift away, like writing is a good example. So rather than writing, I now direct. And I have a conversation, I direct, coach GPT, explain to it what I'm trying to accomplish, whether it's writing a chapter of a book or whether it's like refining an entire pitch. And it's a pure conversation and I'm just nudging it towards the right direction. Usually the first conversation, the first direction, 30% of the way there. Couple conversations later, it gets tighter. We get to about 80%, then you get to the final editing piece, but it accelerates everything so much more. And I really do think, though, that it comes down to the quality of the direction. It's like creating a great movie. You have an amazing screenplay, you have, a great director, and GPT is like creates the landscapes and the special effects and the characters and the actresses and actors and all this sort of stuff. But if you don't have the core screenplay, if you don't have like that really like killer plot line, nothing substantial comes to life, essentially. But yeah.
Yeah, we all basically have to practice the skill of the visionary, right? And that's a lot of people are not used to. They're kind of looking around more for like, okay, what's my role here, rather than what's the outcome that I want to create, and seeing, generative AI as the accelerator pedal, or the teleport button for it, right?
Yeah. Oh, can I give you another example on this?
Please.
So I hate flights. Like I literally hate flights. And I have to do a lot more flights this year because of all the events that we're doing. So I was on a flight and I was like, I have to transform this flight into an experience that I'm going to look forward to. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just use the flights as inner retreats. I mean, they're going to be like guided meditation journeys. So got off a flight, was talking to GPT, and I was like, hey, just construct what I want is a 4-hour inner meditation. Like essentially, let's do Michael Singer, Thich Nhat Hanh. We'll do a couple different pathways. Create a guided 4-hour meditation. Let's give me a couple tracks, options, etc., and crystallize the idea. And within 15 minutes, we had something, right? So I think it's like stuff like that, where when you have an idea or a kernel of an idea, and you can give it direction, it can flesh out everything super quickly from your imagination. That's what I love. I think it's super fun.
So you built an AI that you call your soul teacher. Is that correct? It's kind of your coach, guide, something. And you told me that it's kind of accelerating your growth when we were talking earlier. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's modeled off of Carl Jung, Lao Tzu, and then Phil Jackson, the sports coach, and Coach Wooden, um, and a couple others. I think I just put in, let me think if there's, no, those are my main ones right now. And essentially what it does is it identifies shadows and blind spots. And so I live journal into it. So I've been keeping journals for years. And usually my journals are my blank slate for processing my emotions and feelings. Um, and they help me to step away, do the whole meditation thing, like essentially watch the waves instead of be the wave. So either way, I used to journal a lot to do this. It would take me a lot longer. I write my journal, I process it, take like an hour, maybe sometimes a day for me to process things. Um, this process became so, I can't even explain. So it's now like in minutes. So what GPT has helped me to do, my soul teacher, is essentially I just speak into it. All the stuff you would never say to a human being. Like I'm all the shadows. So just layer it all out, all the stuff that nobody wants to hear. You don't even want to hear it. Force myself to give it to GPT. My soul teacher will reframe it. And because it can reframe and come back with deep probing questions, and it's trained for all of the soul teachers, the great guides, um, it can literally flip my emotional state in a matter of minutes. It's insane. So like what's happened now is I can self-regulate faster. And the emotional mastery part is pretty wild in the process. So I didn't set out to do that necessarily, but what I've noticed is an increased ability to essentially feel an emotion. Let's call it frustration. Something sticks to you, and then I can notice it and almost like triage. I would use AI in the beginning and just go to the soul teacher, but now I almost don't need to. It can like self triage. So there's another part of this that's interesting. The soul teacher AIs, they can function as a guide teacher, but eventually it internalizes to the point where you've created an acceleration model that doesn't actually require the AI itself. Does that make sense? So that's like the super cool part about it, because you don't actually have to use it as a crutch. It sort of internalizes. So I use it a lot for live journaling too. Like I'll be on a walk. The other day I was thinking about waves. I was thinking about how meditation is like you zoom out and every single day the waves are different. And it's like today the waves are very high, tomorrow the waves are smaller, whatever happens to be. But the key is the part between the waves, like the space between the waves, the calmness and the peace between the waves. Some days there are like no waves, and that's great. Like it's very recharging to be hanging out when there's no waves. Um, but I was talking to GPT about this and it instantly crystallized it. I have it crystallize it into like a koan combined with like a journal entry. And there's a couple core ones that I'm just keeping in my journal, contemplation journals for future, probably, who knows, maybe might put that into a book. We'll see. But yeah,
What platform did you use to create this, and kind of what were a couple of the steps that you did to make it?
super easy. Just custom GPT.
Mhm.
I've custom GPT, just build it in. I just go to GPT and I make my own prompts. So I'm just like, hey, I need, and usually I use 4.0, sometimes O1, sometimes, but it just takes forever right now still. So like 4.0, super fast, easy, good enough. And I just explain like, I need a spectacular prompt for an amazing soul teacher. And these are all the spiritual teachers that I'd like to reference. And then it'll just take my thoughts and create a super robust prompt. And then I pop it in to GPT's custom creator. And then it just goes and I'll test it a couple times and it's usually pretty good.
Excellent. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
For someone who's maybe a little bit either intimidated or scared, what's a, baby step they could take to start incorporating it into their work or their job search so that they could, I don't know, just be getting up to speed for the kind of reality and the interacting with the kind of system that you're building?
There are so many ways. First thing is whatever jobs you're applying to, because unfortunately right now, like most companies are still using the application system. I mean, the majority are. There are a couple that are breaking through and starting to use AI interviewers or AI chats and things like this. But because we're living in sort of an application world, number one is copy and paste the job description into GPT, ask for the skills and competencies that recruiting teams most likely looking for, and then modify your resume to match. So just pop in your resume, be like, hey, I want it to match the skills and competencies that this particular recruiting team or JD is going to be looking for. And then it can also help with like, so that's first thing is just resume customization, super fast, super easy. The second thing is actually interview prep. So same thing, pop your job description in, isolate out truly, like be like, act as if, you know, this is a job description by a high performing recruiter and hiring manager team. What are the most likely questions that they're going to ask during this interview to assess for this? Or like, what are the skills and competencies they're going to care about seeing? And what are the questions they're most likely going to ask? And then you can also tell GPT like, hey, I'd love to do a test interview. So why don't you test me? I'm making this up on the spot, so I don't know if any of it's good, but like you can also test me. And so why don't we set up a interactive conversation? Let's go through 5 to 10 test questions. I'm going to give you my responses, and why don't you give me feedback on what's good, what could be stronger? Act as a superstar recruiter who's going to assess my responses, right? And so I think those are a couple easy wins off the bat to essentially leverage AI in an easy way. And I think the easiest way to get started is just talk to it about what's bothering you. Like literally just see what it says to the problems that are inside your mind. So whatever your current top of mind problem is, whether it's work related or personal, throw it into GPT and see what comes out of it. Just be like, this is my problem. How would you solve this? Give me a couple different perspectives. Then you can start playing with it by actually being like, give me a couple perspectives from the people that I respect. These are the people that I really respect and I like the way they think. Help me think about it this way. I always say, how would Michael Singer approach this? Like, how would Thich Nhat Hanh approach this, right? And that's sort of a way that you can do this.
So you occur to me as a true optimist about AI being a force for good. Yeah. And you're very congruent. And I'm just interested, how do you see it changing the lives of everyone or regular people? And what's the most important thing we can do so that that happens?
Well, first of all, I'm an optimist by choice. So just to be, I am an optimist, but I'm an
Mhm.
optimist by choice because I do very much believe that this technology, AI, can be used for bad or for good or for neutrality, whatever it is. But it's our choice to decide which future we want. And I choose to create a better future. And so that's why I'm an optimist. And the story that I will tell always and everything that I'm building and how I use it is going to be within that direction and very congruent to that direction.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of how everyone thinks about it, it's a really good question. Can you reframe that question for me in a different way? I'm going to try to think about how to answer and break it apart into a couple different answers here. It's a big one
Okay, which part of the question?
around how how everyone should use AI, or is it more how
Well,
everyone?
yeah, it's basically okay. I think you see a future where AI is an agent of change, a force for good. It makes life better for all of us, generally. Obviously, there will, be exceptions and so forth. But how do we make this? How does a person like get into that way of looking at things? But then how do they make the future where that actually happens?
Mm, okay, I mean, I think it starts having nothing to do with AI. It simply starts with having to do with how how might you like what is your vision of how you would create a better world, whether it's for yourself or your children or your friends or your community or the world writ large. And
Hmm.
then AI is simply a tool and a teammate to bring it into life faster, essentially an accelerator. So you can think of it as a friend who you can talk to, or you can think of it as a teammate who can work with you, or you can think of it literally as like your team of AI agents that make this vision a reality. That's just how I like that's where it's AI is an accelerator overall. And so essentially it's like it comes down to what do you want? Like what is your innermost heart desire when it comes down to what you, with or without AI, want to see come into place in this world? Like what is the world you want to create? And then you start there and it's like, well, if the world I want to create is one where oceans are not polluted and where 50% of the population, instead of being landlocked and never having a chance to actually swim in the sea, can actually swim in clean waters, then the question becomes, well, how can AI help me to figure this out? First, you can probably start talking with AI and just be like, this is my vision. I would like to create a world where everyone can swim in the waters and it's not polluted by 2040 to the point where no one can swim anymore or no one can fish anymore. Um, and then start having those conversations. A lot will come out of it. I have a like library of business plans that are built with AI, that are all just like startups on the back burner, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's all. I don't know if I want to do more startups, to be honest, but it's like it's fun. It's one of the most fun things is creating possible futures with AI. And if it's like your vision of the future is something different, I want to create a beautiful book of poetry that captures the way that I see this world in tiny koans, but I'm not a master koan creator. So now what I'm going to do is just regurgitate my thoughts and the things that matter to me with GPT, and it can help me write the koans and capture my entire stream of consciousness in koans now. You can do that too, like whatever it looks like. So it's just like a tool that extends your mind so much further than it's currently capable of. It's literally like having one brain, but instead of having one brain now, you have like an infinite number of brains, essentially. Or not infinite, let's just say like 3 brains instead of 1 for now.
A super brain, a meta brain.
That's right.
Yeah. And for me, when I teach on the topic and I talk to people about it, I mean, what it's come down to for me is probably the key is how you represent it in your mind, how you hold it, how you relate to it, what you think of it as. Like, what is it to you? In other words, some people think of it as, well, it's a great recipe maker. And so to them, this is a recipe maker. That's what it is, you know, and for some people, it's a great coder. But for some people, it's a philosopher. You know what I'm saying? And some people, it's a, you know, a mind emulator. And so how do you hold it? What is it to you? Or what set of things is it to you?
Yeah, one version is a teammate for sure, like an amazing co-editor, a collaborator, co-creator. It's like having an incredible chief of staff that can essentially bring everything to life that you're imagining in your mind. And also with operator agents, it's not there yet, but when operator gets better, the ability to now execute against the tasks that you set in your mind. So that's one side of it, is like having this incredibly amazing team, which imagine what that does for people, right? This type of team, I mean, it's like you raise money, you build companies, you get to it, like you build executive team, then you have this amazing team that can help make your vision come true. Like that's possible now for everyone to have this team at their fingertips. That's crazy, like what that's going to unlock. So very, very interesting there. The second part of it is I actually just think of it as an extension of me. Like essentially what I've realized from playing with this, you know, all this different versions of AI, everything from what we're building in our company, from AI interviewers all the way down to like how I personally use AI is, um, it's not its own thing yet. Like it functions as something that extends your thoughts, your mind, and your capabilities and actualizes it faster. So essentially, like I don't look at it as like, oh, it's a recipe maker or it's a this or it does a job. It can do any job because it's just an extension of you. So it can be anything. Like if today I'm making recipes, then it's the extension of my recipe maker. Like if tomorrow I've decided that I'm going to build the next ocean depolluting innovation, it's an extension of that. So that's basically it. Like, so I think that's the other part. I think it's also a mirror. Like AI is a fantastic mirror, and it can be leveraged to illuminate your blind spots, your shadows, to accelerate self-work, to identify not just blind spots in self-work, but also in business. You know, one of my favorite things to do is to run, here's all the products that we're building at UpWage, build me a dystopian future so I can be aware of all the possible dystopian futures that can occur without my, you know, blind spots just leading us into a direction that we don't want to go. So to be able to build with that level of awareness of here's the techno optimist future, but here's also like the dystopian futures and holding those simultaneously and then being able to navigate towards and make sure that we don't move towards that dystopian future is awesome. Like it's really great to be able to be aware of all that, right?
Excellent, excellent. Couple of little thoughts to just kind of jam on what you're saying there. So my understanding is that when you use a writing implement, that what happens is your system remaps it as being an extension of you. It's kind of like a little finger that starts sticking out, and you stop thinking of it as being something at a kind of subconscious level. It actually becomes you. It's part of you. Or if you're, you know, you're using a knife to kind of cut something, right? It becomes a hand that's actually cutting. I understand also that if you there's personal distance if you're standing, you know, talking to someone that's anywhere from maybe a foot to 2 or 3 feet. But then if you're riding a bike, all of a sudden your system kind of remaps the bike as being an extension of you. So now your body is your body plus the bike. And then social distance changes because now riding on a bike with someone else, it's like several, you know, feet away. But then the same thing happens when you're in a car. The car becomes your body, but an extension. I've even heard that airplane pilots, when they're driving the plane, you know, they land and they're driving it, you know, around on the runway, and they actually experience it, and then they go get in their car and their kind of body, you know, shrinks again or something. And so what we're talking about here is really, it's an extension. You actually have it as this is an extension of you in that same kind of sense of your mind body, if that, yeah.
Absolutely an extension of me. And and also I metaphorically love where you were going with that. Like super, super interesting. The other way I was thinking about this is speaking to your earlier question around how people can, who are not used, like if you're not accustomed to AI, it's that talking out loud thing. You know, so I noticed this in writing. Like a lot of us get writer's block. You're like trying to put something down. Like even though the computer's an extension of you, or the pen is an extension of you, it's like, I have a writer's block. What do I write? Just talk to it. We're much more programmed to be able to speak our thoughts. I think it's just like an innate human thing where it's just like, I have thoughts, I'm going to speak them.
Yes.
And that process is really fascinating because it's essentially what I've noticed with writing in particular is uh AI is an exceptional extension writer. Exceptional for I love writing with AI.
Hmm.
But it's because like I can just talk to it and it can start somewhere. I can give it frameworks and it can just start creating stuff. And it's
Yeah.
super fun to do that. And so that is true. It's truly an extension. But I would just say talk out loud to AI, like see what happens. And then basically it can extend your thoughts, your imagination in multiple directions a lot faster. And so that's where I do think like this director, it's like what happens when everyone no longer has to be doing everything. You don't have to come up with the idea, write it down, then script write it and turn it into a movie. You can literally just direct and bam, there's your entire movie. Like the quality of movies that we create is going to change. Like I'm just using movies as a metaphor, but basically
Yeah.
our holding point. But that's it. Like everyone can direct now.
Yeah.
That's why these solo like agent AI agent based solopreneurs are so interesting. Like I've been wondering about this. Like is the next generation going to be so AI native that everyone can build their own businesses instantaneously? And what a freeing world that is. Because right now, again, opportunity is concentrated because there are capital constraints to a lot of the things that we no longer have capital constraints to doing because of AI. So it's
Yeah.
just an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. 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 So many ideas coming through. Okay, two more things to kind of jam on what you're saying. An extension of your body or your mind body is one way of looking at it. And another way the way I represent it that seems empowering to me is, um, 100-watt light bulb will light a room, but a 100-watt laser beam will cut through a piece of metal, right? When you get all the photons like going in the same direction, it's a whole different kind of deal. And so I look at it, sometimes I imagine it as being like this infinite intelligence, or I don't know about infinite, but on its way there, approaching, approaching, it's going there fast, at least relative to how I can think, the level I can think on. And I imagine, um, it's this like huge light source. And you know how you can, I just happen to have some of these props around here, but you can take like a magnifying glass and you can take the sun and you can concentrate it on something. And all of a sudden the sun becomes a very different thing than it was to whatever you point that light at. You can just burn something, you can light it immediately. Another one, I just dug this up. This is one of my favorite metaphors. Lighthouse, the big lenses up there, they're called Fresnel lenses. And it's funny, I got all my little props here. It's just kind of perfect for this conversation. And what they do is they take a little bit of light and then they just send it out, miles or kinds of tens of miles. I've got a prism around here somewhere too. But I kind of imagine it's like you can be like a prism that captures all of that light and then you can focus it in any direction that you want. And the bigger you can hold the intelligence in your own mind, the more access you have to it almost, because then you can do some of the things like you're talking about. One more thing to kind of keep jamming on your theme here is I wrote a book a few years ago called Opportunity. And in there, I was talking about how the nature of opportunity itself changes over time with the acceleration of technology. And generative AI did not exist yet when I wrote this. And so, but what I talked about is how there's an accelerated time between idea and reality. And then when I wrote it, it would be if you like had an idea for a website, you had to like think about it, you had to go find a designer, and then they had to, code it up, and then you might have to have a developer involved, and it might be weeks to months before you'd really have the thing. And I wrote about how within the next several years, you're going to be able to literally start talking and see it happen in front of you. I didn't think it would be this fast, but it's real now. You can actually go and just start talking and see a website being built and all the code being written. And so I'm just kind of like double underscoring what you're talking about here about the power of being, you're calling it like the director, I would call it like the visionary of practicing that skill of imagining the outcome you want, then saying, okay, I have access to this kind of infinite intelligence resource that can help me accelerate all aspects of it. And in many cases, maybe just literally do it, like firing up Midjourney and, making some graphics or making a website.
Yeah, I love this visualization of the microscope and sort of the fractal. So essentially, like the power of AI, is building on this, like the power of AI is like the sun, right? It's infinite.
Yes.
And so, yeah, and another, I mean, another way to think about it. So, like, I sort of use the metaphor of a library. It's like an infinite library.
Yeah.
And so AI can read, I mean, the reason why it's so intelligent isn't because it's anything truly special, to be totally honest. If any human being had the capacity to read every single piece of text on the earth and every framework and absorb it all within a year, the outputs would be astronomical. Like, think about, so I've always thought like the quality of inputs, like the quality of your inputs equals the quality of your outputs, in business and life and everything else. And so in that case, like people are very predictable because if you know their inputs, then you can pretty much predict what their outputs are going to look like, what their actions will look like. AI is predictable in the same way. As long as you know what the inputs are, then you know predictably what the outputs are going to look like approximately. Um, so the future really belongs to then if you no longer, let's say in the medical field, instead of having to read thousands of texts because AI can read them all for you, it comes down to not having to spend your lifetime digesting content and absorbing it, but understanding how to move the inputs themselves. Like, and so this speaks more to your microscope, your fractal type situation. And so that also is what I think you're calling a visionary type, I call it the director type role, but essentially it is the, well, how do I build the ability to harness the power of the entire library without having to read every single book in the library now? Do I only need to read the first 100 books to be able to harness the entire power of 1 million books and how to manage the books themselves and the content inside of them? That's like very fascinating to think about, right?
Make sure the next step you take is good for the future.
Yes, that's it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Diana. It's been great having this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you.